Get ready for the Bob Graham Experience.
Okay, you're not going to believe this one. We're going to talk to a guy who was a carpenter, got bored, even though it was family business, got bored, decided to become a motivational speaker, and then ran across the United States, Forrest Gump style. We'll talk about all that. And now he does motivational speaking, and he really gets mindset stuff. We'll talk about all that. He is just, I don't even know how to put it into words. He's the kind of person that, well, you might have run into him as he crossed the U.S. He's also set another world record for running in Death Valley. He's a special person. I mean that in a really good way. So all that and more is coming on this episode of the Bob Graham Experience. Here we go. Oh, I forgot to ask you the most important question. How do you say your first name? I've been debating it with my girlfriend all weekend, and whatever you tell me, I'm going to lie and make sure my answer is right.
No, you got to tell me first. What did you come up with?
I came up with Crew.
That's a new one. No, that's a new one.
Croix.
Yes, that's it.
A friend of mine said Croix. I'm like, there's no way those. And they're like, no, the OI makes a U sound.
It's Croix. Your girlfriend is right.
Okay.
Make sure to tell her that. You got to admit it.
Well, I did because she'll watch the podcast just to see if I'm right. All right, you ready, Croix? Here we go.
There you go. Perfect.
Croix, thank you so much for being with us. This is indeed an honor and a privilege. I'm real excited to dig into this. So let's start at what I think is probably the most interesting thing, which is you do a whole lot of running, or you have. I don't know if you do now, but you have. Talk to us about how you got started running and what it's led to, and why do you do it? Because I can't get myself back to running.
Most people don't even want to run across the street, but I ran across the whole country.
So you're like Forrest Gump.
Pretty much literally, yeah, except without the beard. And hopefully slightly smarter.
Fair enough. Although running across the country would suggest otherwise from the onset.
It definitely does. It definitely does.
Why did you do that? Was this just one of those things that you said, gee, you start running like Forrest Gump and next thing you know, you're across the country? Or
not too far from that. It was at a point in my life where I was looking to do something extraordinary, but I didn't know what it was. And so I kept asking myself the question that changed my life, which was, what would you do if you knew that you could not fail? If you were going to succeed, what would you do? And so I kept asking myself that question. And I had watched a video on a guy who ran across America. And I thought, that's the coolest freaking thing I've ever heard in my entire life, except I wasn't a runner. I'm 39 years old, never really more than a jog of a mile or two in my entire life. Wasn't terribly athletic since I was a kid. Working all my life and never really did any athletics as an adult. But I saw this video and I'm like, that is the most amazing thing ever. Imagine seeing the whole country by foot. And so I started training, and with just 1 year of training, I was in San Diego to run a marathon a day for 100 days to get to New York. So never a day off, never a break, 26 miles a day for 100 consecutive days.
What was only 1 year of training. What weather you faced?
The weather was actually, I got lucky. It was very good, almost all of it, except I did run through the hurricane that took out a town in, gosh, where was that? Must have been Louisiana, I think, at the time.
Okay, wow.
So we ended up just 30 miles from where the hurricane destroyed, just literally leveled the town. And we were just 30 miles away from that, driving in a tin box of an RV.
Okay. All right. So would you recommend someone do this, or is this a crazy thing to do and you're glad you did it and we can all learn from it?
I would recommend to follow your dreams, whatever that might be. If you're a runner, then sure, go ahead and run. Even if you're not a runner, if you're inspired to do it, then absolutely. But the idea behind it is that you're doing something that truly inspires you, and that in turn will inspire others. And I also did it as a career move, as a business move too. Because at that time I was leaving the carpentry trade. I used to be a house builder, and I was leaving that trade and I was becoming a professional speaker, an author and speaker, but I was a nobody. Nobody knew me. And so why would you hire some unknown guy who hasn't really done anything spectacular to speak on your stage? So I needed a platform, and the Run Across America was part of that platform. So in addition to running every day, I also gave a talk to a different at-risk audience. So United Way, Hope for the Warriors, Wounded Warriors, addiction shelters, homeless centers, all these groups of people who are in a transition in their life as well. And my message was always to rise above your circumstances and to create a life that you're proud of. And so every day I would speak and then I would run a marathon, sleep a few hours and start the whole thing all over.
Wow. What made you want to leave carpentry and go into speaking? That's not the easiest field to get into, I can attest to.
No, and to make money on it is even harder. But I
That's
was
a whole episode of its own.
yeah, it is. That could be a whole conversation with the great panel of people even.
Yes. Many, many.
But my dad was a carpenter, my brother's a carpenter, my uncle was a carpenter, so of course I became a carpenter as well. And I did that for 20 years. I started when I was 16, did it into my mid 30s, moved into flipping houses, made really good money doing that. But it wasn't something I wanted to do the rest of my life. And I knew it wasn't something I wanted to do the rest of my life for various reasons. One is because my dad at that time was in his probably mid 50s or so, and all of his buddies were, but they were all beat up. And I'm like, I don't want to get to my 50s, which I'm now in my 50s. So like, I don't want to get to that age and to be like these guys who are hurt and broken down physically anyway, and just had a life of physical abuse from their job because it's so hard. And as good as I was at carpentry and as much as I did like it, it just, the dust and the chemicals and all this stuff is like, this isn't a great long-term solution. And I had seen a guy who spoke on stage. I went to an event, had never been to one before. It was a multi-speaker event. So it was just guy after guy after guy talking about, real estate and stock market. And this one guy came up, motivation, big guy with big teeth. You could probably guess who it is. It was Tony Robbins. Yeah. And he wasn't into it talking for 20 minutes. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And so I was inspired to do that. And that changed the trajectory of my life and started moving me in that direction. I joined Toastmasters, had never spoken in my life. Joined Toastmasters, figured out how to do that, took up every volunteer opportunity I could to speak anywhere for anyone. If there was 3 people in a room, I'm going. Because I had to get the miles in, if you will, of learning how to speak and inspire the audience, make eye contact, and do all these things you do as a speaker, as you know. And then that eventually was like, okay, well, how do I turn this into a career now? I like it enough. How do I actually turn it into a career? And that's a whole different thing.
Well, I want to come back to the business aspects of it. But first, before that, a couple of questions for you. First of all, let's talk about your unstoppable morning. Now, I just subscribed to your 5-day challenge, the unstoppable morning. I don't know what that means yet. I'm sure I'll get an email in the next hour or two. I don't think it's just drink a cup of coffee and go on with your day, which is what I typically do. So I'm looking for something here. How'd that get started and what does it try to achieve?
That got started through an evolution of figuring out what works and what doesn't work for me. There's a lot of stuff out there, and morning routines now, as you know, are super popular. A lot of the stuff they teach you in morning routines is, it sounds good, but it doesn't actually do much for you. Most people just like they just grab a cup of coffee, run out of the house, go to a job, and there's no thought put into the morning. There's nothing scheduled or planned or direction. And so the unstoppable morning is just that. It's to give you direction and purpose and start you off. So if you can win your morning, it makes it a lot easier to win your whole day. And it's quite easy. It's wake up and you go for exercise for 20 minutes. And then you do some mindset stuff and you do some journaling stuff. And altogether, it'll take you 40 minutes to an hour, depending on exactly what you're doing. So 20 minutes of exercise, and then the routine breaks down to a couple different increments. But you're journaling, and the idea of journaling is doing 3 things. One is to review what you've done. How did yesterday go? And then what was good, what was bad about it? Where do you want to go? And then it's to make the plan. And the reason for the journaling is because you're getting in, and handwriting preferably, is because you're getting into using an aspect of your mind that you don't normally use. One is the writing aspect of it, but the other part is thinking about your day and what went well and what didn't go well. And what happens over time is that you actually start solving your own problems. You become your own therapist. You emotionally become healthier and happier. You become more productive and effective because you're figuring out, well, if you keep writing the same thing down, I've watched social media too much. You write that down enough times, enough days in a row, eventually you're going to be like, I got to change this. Okay. And organically, you start to change your life to the way you want it to be. So instead of letting other people dictate your life, you start dictating your own life and putting in your own direction.
Sounds like a theme that we're hitting over and over from I changed careers and ran because it was really cool and I just wanted to try something. And it was all mindset. And now you're advocating the unstoppable morning as a mindset. Are we getting a theme here?
It is definitely a theme, and these are all things that I had to figure out along the way. Because if you go from a carpenter where I literally barely graduated high school, they kind of threw me out because they didn't want me there again, and to go from a very blue collar job to something that's relatively intellectual speaking and writing, it's an evolution. I had to figure out, how do I get this to work for me? And especially a guy who, back in the day we didn't call it that, but I would have been as ADD as you get. And so how do you overcome these tendencies, especially creatives, entrepreneurs? We have all these billions of ideas. Every day we have, like our mind runs, what is it, 80,000 thoughts a day, if I remember right off the top of my head, something like that. An entrepreneurial or a creative type, we're probably double that.
Oh, yeah.
I have no science behind this, but I'm guessing that because the way we work is much different. So how do you stay focused? How do you keep going? And so I've had to learn certain techniques to get my mind to do that. When I do the physical work as carpenter, that was very easy for me to stay focused. It was, I guess, because I started it so young. I literally started when I was 13 working for my dad on weekends and summers. And so I just developed the mental pathways for physical work. And that became very, very easy for me. So I had to then, as an adult, start changing those pathways from doing physical stuff to doing mental stuff, which was very, very hard for me. And so and that was the end result of that in part was Unstoppable Morning. So the Unstoppable Morning and the Unstoppable Journal, which goes with it.
Okay. Now, doing carpentry work, and I'm no carpenter, but every now and then I will play with a piece of wood just for giggles. What I like about it and what I find most appealing to me when I'm really overwhelmed with work is doing something physical, something tangible on the weekend that I see the result. Like I built a headboard for myself over the weekend. And Sunday evening, I'm like, I didn't build it like from carpentry. It was pieces and they had to go together like IKEA kind of stuff. But I really like that. And I'm always contrasting that with the work I do where I'm doing business coaching or I'm coaching people on writing a book. And the time it takes to get that book, in that limbo, you're sort of like, am I making progress or am I not? I see words on the page, but are they the words that are going to appear? Do you think there's a different kind of motivation for something that's physical like carpentry versus something more mental like speaking or writing, like you said?
I think both can do. I think it depends on the way you're kind of hardwired. So I was wired very young to do physical. And of course, we grew up in a time where there wasn't technology really like there is today. So I'm outside in the backyard as a tiny little boy playing with my Matchbox cars. And because my dad was a carpenter, I used to build houses in the dirt out of rocks and sticks and things like that. So I grew up hardwiring my brain for physical things. But nowadays, a lot of people are growing up in a very different world than we grew up. And so their brain is wired for the intellectual stuff, for the computer work, and for the mental thinking. I've had to change the wiring of my brain to do that. And so like you were creating the headboard this weekend. My weekends are often doing something physical as well. If I'm not running and training, I'm creating or I'm building or doing something. This weekend, I happen to be fixing the gutters.
Okay.
The gutters, they started leaking and that seemed kind of weird. So I looked at the gutters and was like, I don't understand why it's not, why it's leaking in this particular spot, because that should be the spot that it just goes out, normal. And then I sighted it eventually and I looked down the gutter and it was dipped the opposite way it should be.
Okay.
Like, that's not a good sign. And then I went down to the deck below it and I sighted the deck and the deck was dipped. So I had to jack up the deck to get the house to sit the way it's supposed to sit. And then as I'm checking the gutters, I realized the gutters were installed incorrectly. That was a subcontractor. I didn't do it. And I never knew it. 18 years later, I was like, these gutters are not built or not installed properly. So I had to loosen them all, reinstall them. And so I'm doing this all weekend. And then I'm looking at them like, now these gutters, they're filthy. So I'm cleaning them and I'm scrubbing them down. But the point is that me to go into that world is like meditation to me, or it's like therapy. Okay. And I go to the physical world, not so much fixing gutters, that's kind of boring, but when I build something with my hands out of wood, It's very, very therapeutic to me, and it operates a different section of the brain than the intellectual work does. So
Okay.
I think we need both. I think we all need both. We need a creative outlet, whether it's working with wood, doing something with yarn, painting, whatever it might be. And I think we also need the intellectual stuff.
So it sounds like you do a lot of work on mindset. You've studied the mind. It sounds like a fair amount. And you're an entrepreneur. So let's talk about entrepreneurship and mindset. How do you square those two aspects? Because I often feel like entrepreneurship is not easy on the mind. There's a lot, like you said, you have a million ideas. You're trying to do all these things. You've got a lot of setbacks. How do you see it, and how do you make it so that you don't lose a lot of sleep, or maybe you do?
It's funny you say that. I lost a few hours sleep last night. Woke up at 2:30 and my mind just started, and that was it. I put on an audio track to kind of calm my mind, a little meditative type thing.
Okay.
And after, I don't know, 30 minutes for 40 minutes or so, I was like, this isn't working. So I turned it off and I just laid in bed and I meditated.
Okay.
Kind of like the more unstoppable morning routine. I sort of did that early today at 2:30 in the morning because I couldn't fall back to sleep. And I went through sort of the same process, but in my mind. And that was able to purge all the toxic stuff that came up, all the things in my mind just racing. And I was able to get rid of that and go back to sleep and sleep really well for the remaining hours. Mindset and entrepreneurial mindset is everything. Whether it's you're an entrepreneur, you're working for another job, you're losing weight, or whatever you want to do. Mindset's everything, because without the proper mindset, without the right mind constructs, you're going to struggle. So if you can't sit down and figure out a way to get yourself to focus on one project, you're never going to get the project done. If you can't figure out to get your mind aligned with, say, lose 50 pounds, you're never going to lose the weight, or you'll lose it and you'll gain it back real quick, because you have to change the way you're wired for that. So if you're wired to be distracted easily, you have to rewire your brain to be very focused. If you're overweight, you have to rewire your brain from being an overweight guy to a healthy and fit guy. It's a lot different than I just want to lose 50 pounds. I want to be 180 pounds healthy and fit and have a six pack is a very different, or even not even six pack, just a trim stomach is a very
I'd take
different
a 2
mindset.
pack at this point, 4 pack, 1 pack.
But we have this in our society today. We have this idea of like, let's get the quick fix. Let's get rich quick. Let's lose the weight fast. And those rarely work long term because they're not designed to rewire your mind for the goal that you want.
So every goal I have, every big goal, I've got to rewire my mind? Or do you think over time we start to build on what we've already wired and keep, enhancing that?
A little bit of both. If it's a short-term, one-time kind of goal, then maybe you don't have to rewire your brain for the long term anyway. You just have to do it for that particular thing. And that's kind of easy to do. Like you want to run a 5K. You've never run a 5K before, so you're going to do it. You can train for 30 days and you can run a 5K. You won't be terribly fast, but it doesn't take that much work. Even if you're overweight and out of shape, it might take you 2 months, but you can slog through it. You can get it done. And that doesn't take a whole lot of rewiring because it's a one-time, short-term goal. But if you want to then be healthy and fit for the rest of your life, like I'm still the same weight I've been for 20 years, because that's the way my brain is wired. And if I get 10 pounds heavier, I'm like, okay, I need to do something. And so I maybe increase the exercise slightly more and I improve my diet slightly more, and I'll naturally lose the weight within a month or so, 5-6 weeks. It's a big difference than being, say, 30, 40, 50 pounds overweight and then wanting to lose the weight and then you lose it, but then you haven't built that mindset. And then, of course, you're going to go back to your old habits. You start eating the way you used to eat. You'll stop moving the way you lost. When you lost the weight, you'll stop moving in that way. And then eventually you'll start gaining the weight back because you haven't changed the wiring in your mind. Okay. And maybe because simply you just didn't realize you needed to, because a lot of people don't. They don't realize, like, oh, I'm going to do on a diet. I'm going to lose weight. And they think that's just the way it happens. And then I'll just keep it off. But it doesn't unless you accompany the mindset aspect with it.
Are you someone who believes in big goals or little goals, or both?
Both, definitely both. I think we need the big goals to inspire us to do something incredible, but the little goals are what gets us to the big goals. It was roughly 1 million steps to get from California to New York. Roughly 1 million steps to run across the country. depending on how you calculate it. I didn't actually count. But if you go to Google and you Google,
good choice.
but if you go to Google and say how many steps in a mile, and you do the calculations out from there, but roughly 1,000,000. But that wasn't even a marathon a day. That wasn't a mile at a time. That was literally one step after the other. And some days when I was in so much pain that it was literally just getting to the next block. And then you'd focus on the next block. And that was all I had to do all day just to get through that 26 miles. It's just focus on where am I going next? It's like when you're driving at night, your headlights can't see hundreds and hundreds of yards. They can't see miles for sure. It can only see whatever it is, the next 40 or 50, yards in front of you. But you don't need to see all that distance to drive across the country or to drive wherever you have to go. You just have to see how far your headlights go. And so if you focus on that next goal, then you focus on the next goal after that. You drive as far as your headlights will see and just keep going. You'll accomplish amazing things. So mine was running a mile at a time, or some days a block at a time. Some days it was one step at a time, literally. And then you just keep doing that and you'll accomplish those big goals. But the big goal was the run across America. The worst days, it was literally taking just one more step.
Okay. And in the end, was it the journey or the destination that you're more proud of?
The journey was definitely way cooler, but I think it was the destination in this case. The journeys who transformed me from who I was to who I am. But the destination, that's just kind of that cool thing you could say, is like I ran across America. And there's only a few hundred of us in the world that can say that. So it's a very elite group. And my world record that I have that I did a year later, there's only 4 of us that can say that. So that's even more elite group. And that's a really cool thing to hang your hat on, if you will. But that doesn't really mean anything. So it's really the journey is the more important part, but the goal, that thing is the cool part. And the evidence of that is after I ran across America, I trained for another year. I was asking myself, what can I do now? What's harder than run across America? And it was running through Death Valley. That's in California. It's the hottest place on the planet in August, running 146 miles. And I was doing it not with the crew, not with an official race, but against the clock, pushing a cart. So the cart had my food, my water, my clothes, my supplies, everything I needed to go from the lowest point to the highest point in the United States. And so the clock starts, and then when you get to the finish line, you get to the finish line, and I'm running the first time I'm doing it, and I get 6 miles in, and I'm starting to really feel like crap. And I'm like, this isn't a good sign. I get to mile 11 and I'm starting to deal with heat exhaustion. Now I knew I would deal with these problems, but it wasn't expected for 50 or 80 miles, way down the road. I get to mile 23 and I have to take an unplanned break. I'm hiding under one of the only trees in Death Valley because there's literally almost nothing. This happened to be one of the only trees, and I'm hiding under it. I'm trying to hydrate and just nothing's going well. I get to mile 34 and my body just shuts down. It's done. I can't beat the record because I'm way behind schedule. And I'm not even sure at that point if I can finish it. So I have an emergency crew there. I had a paramedic and a photographer there. But I'm doing this on my own. It's an unassisted run. And I call the crew over. And I'm like, that's it. We're done. And my videographer, he's pissed. He's like, you're the guy who ran across America. You told audience after audience after audience, you never quit it. Now you're quitting. This is an epic failure. And he was right. But we go back to Vegas, get back into the air conditioning. And I wake up the next morning. I call Josh in and I'm like, we're going back. Like, what do you mean we're going back? I don't know what I'm doing next year. It's like, no, we're going back in 3 days. Let's recoup. Let's restock. Let's get everything ready again. I'm going to sleep for a few days and then we're going to go back. And he's like, yeah, you're full of it. But in 3 days later, we were back. I had to find a new crew. My videographer stayed with me, but I had to find a new crew to the emergency crew. And because it's a real life and death thing in Death Valley. Sure. So I had to have a medic or somebody with me just in case. So we get back there and I'm at not mile 43. I'm at mile 0, starting at the starting point. But this time there's like no fanfare. It's just me. And it's just the point.
And what you face.
It was just to finish. It's like, can I do this? I have to go back and I have to try to finish this. Forget the record, forget anything. Let's just go complete it. And I get to mile 6 and I'm flying. I'm doing great. I get to mile 11, the same place that I was dealing with heat exhaustion for the first time, and a little blue butterfly comes flying next to me. Now, Death Valley is rattlesnakes and scorpions and rocks and
Yep.
dirt. That's it. There's nothing there. So why this little blue butterfly was there is just like weird. When I was training for Run Across America, I get a phone call from my dad. He's like, "Your brother, he died." I'm like,
Oh,
"What,
wow.
Darren? That's impossible." He's like, "Get over here now." So we go down there, go to the hospital. My brother had died of a massive heart attack, just 45 years old.
Hmm.
A few weeks later, after all the dust has settled from that, my sister's like, "I want to get a tattoo in memory of Darren." And she gets a blue butterfly on her shoulder, the same kind of butterfly I saw in Death Valley. So I talked to the butterfly for the moment that it was in front of me and said hi to my brother, and we had a little conversation, and then it flew away. I get to mile 22, 32, 45, and I'm flying. I'm way ahead of schedule. I'm going up the hill. You know, you go up and down the mountains, 25,000 feet of elevational climb. I get to the top. I take a picture. I don't just become the third person in the world to finish this world record. I become the number one, beating the record that was there for 13 years. I beat a
Wow.
13-year-old record by almost 5 hours. I come down off the mountain and I go back to the house of the guy that officiates this whole thing, filling out all the paperwork, things you got to do after the record. And there's another guy there. His name is Bogey. And he had tried to beat the record a few weeks earlier. But his cart, because you're pushing this cart with food, and supplies, it got sideswiped by a car. And he couldn't finish it. And he had tried this several times without success. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, I had never met him in person before, but knew of him. And so we said hi real quick. And he was going up the mountain to go to the start line to try to break it the next day. And I never thought anything of it. 3 days later, I get a text message. Bogey beat my record. I held the world record for literally 3 days. And I was so mad. Like, you didn't want to be around me. I was ready to tear anybody's head off. I was the grumpiest, nastiest person for a few months. And I go on a run with an Ironman triathlete friend of mine. And she's also a fitness coach. She helps women lose weight. And so she's a Jillian Michaels, in your face, really, like military-esque type person. Okay. And we go for a run. We're 9 miles in. We stop at a bridge and we're just talking. And I'm complaining. I'm telling her the story. And I'm just moaning and groaning. And she gets into my face. And she's like, "Listen to me. That can never be taken away from you. Once a world record champion, you're always a world record champion. Stop crying, suck it up, and move on with your life and go do something amazing again." And it was the medicine I needed. Didn't want, but it was the medicine I needed. And in that process of downloading all of this and figuring it out, I realized that the journey is what was the most important thing. Who I had to become to, one, go from a non-runner to run across America, another year of training, then break the world record and become one of the most elite runners in the entire world. And 2 years earlier, I wasn't a runner at all. It's the journey and who you become in that transformation. And so I got a couple neat things that I get to talk about. I ran across America. I got a world record. It's fun.
Yeah.
But it's the process and the transformation that's the most important. So it's a long answer to your question.
No, it's fine. So with entrepreneurship, it's the journey I would assume you've come to realize as well. However, what's the cool destination you're trying to reach? I'm curious.
For me right now, it's building a one-person company.
Okay.
I thought I wanted to have like a really big company like I did in construction in this world. And I realized that's not what I wanted. I got a few people that I'm shadowing, if you will, at a distance. I don't know them personally. Dan Coe is one of them. Mm-hmm. And a couple of these guys that are in this intellectual world like we are, they're running businesses that are making $1 million, $2 million, one guy $5 million. And they're one-person companies. And so they have their digital products. They have their books, their authors, and they have a couple of products. And they've built these businesses that are literally worth millions, netting 80%, sometimes more. They're a one-man show. At most, they're having one VA.
Right.
I was like, well, that sounds pretty good because that's the life that allows me to continue the lifestyle I want, but gives me the income that I want. Because up until recently, I haven't really been concerned with income. I've been traveling the world. I've been doing all these things. I was nomadic for 7 years. I'm living in South America and Asia and Mexico, Costa Rica. I'm in all these different places. I have this amazing lifestyle.
You clearly are single.
Yes. But now that
If
I've
you had
traveled the
said
world,
no, I think I would have just fainted right here.
but I
Wow.
had all these amazing experiences that very few people get to experience, but I wasn't really focused on my business terribly deeply, I guess you could say. I wasn't really in line with that, but now I'm realigning my goals so that I can have not only the lifestyle I want, but also the income I want, like these guys.
So tell me about that shift in your mindset and how you're going about your business. What it sounds like you're pretty much doing whatever. Now are you more intentional with what you do each day and tracking it better? Or what are the things that you've done to make it so you can have a one person business as big as you want it to be?
Before the pandemic, I was the author, speaker, and I was getting paid almost 20 grand for a single keynote speech. So I had broken into that field and I was doing really well. Pandemic changes everything. Luckily, I had started to create an online business a little before that, but I wasn't terribly serious with it. But then I figured out a few products that I could sell, all about mindset, and did really well with that when I had a business partner. And that business partner and I, we weren't fully aligned in terms of some things. We weren't totally in the same direction. And so we worked together on and off here and there. We make pretty good money doing that. We've sold millions in the products as a gross revenue number.
Mm-hmm.
But because we weren't aligned, I needed to go my own way.
Okay.
So now I had to figure out all of those things that he did. How do I do those things? Not hire contractors out, because to hire a contract out, as you know, for some of this technical stuff, if they don't do it right, then you're screwed. If there's something wrong and you can't get in there to fix it real quick, you're screwed. And if you're in the middle of a launch, I mean, this literally can mean tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes $1 million or more. And so you've got to get this right. So I had to learn a lot of this stuff. And the big challenge for me was that I don't like doing that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I'll write a speech. I'll go give a speech. I like being in the center of attention. I like doing the creative stuff, moving around. But to sit at a desk for hour after hour after hour, I can't say is so much. It's still a little bit of a challenge, but it was a really, really big challenge. And so now I've figured out, how do I work with my personality to be able to do those things so I could build a multi-million-dollar business with one person and net 70, 80, 90% of the revenue.
Wouldn't you be more likely to outsource it? The things that you don't like, don't know, don't understand, with the theory being that that technology person, for instance, can do that work for you. If it's someone you trust, you can look behind them. But really getting into that nuance of that really takes you away from your zone of excellence, for want of a better phrase.
There is a lot of validity to that. And that's probably a very smart way if you were looking to grow faster or scale very big. I'm not looking to do either one of those.
Okay.
I want to build a company that's making excess of $1 million, my personal net, and be able to have control of my lifestyle. And if I have a big team and other people managing these things, now I got to manage them, or I got to get a manager to manage them.
Okay.
And it's just not the lifestyle I'm looking for. And now that I have several people that I can model that are doing the business model that I want, now I'm going to mimic what they're doing and create the same sort of thing. And the difference between where I was before and where I am now, one is with my Unstoppable product. It's totally aligned with who I am. I didn't have that before. I was trying to figure out my messaging, the product name, and all these things, and it just wasn't right. I was going with the whole dream big idea, which is great, but nothing you could really sink your teeth into.
Right.
And it sounds good and it's really nice, and I suppose you could build a business on it, but it was very difficult because it was way too soft of a topic. And this is still soft, but it's much less soft. And so now my messaging is much clearer, and that makes it a lot easier.
Well, it's an outcome-based product, right? Unstoppable morning, that there's something there. Presumably, after I do your 5-day challenge, I'm going to have some change in my life.
Yes.
Dream big. I'm not sure I'm going to have something at the end of a 5-day dream big challenge. Yes, I'll have a big dream, but I'm not sure the steps to accomplish that are there. And it might actually make me more annoyed than anything else. I mean, at least at the end of a 5-day unstoppable morning, I can say, you know what? I hate journaling. It really pisses me off. I'm never going to do it again. And I at least have that Does that sound like kind of, I'm going into marketing world and
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's it's a 5-day outcome based challenge. And then the journal, if you use the journal with it, which you'll get a digital download to that. So you just print it out at home and you could use it. All you have to do is print out the 5 days and you just use that for your challenge. But the idea behind what I was doing before, what I'm doing now is now I have two things that are much more outcome based. So you have the journal, which gives you the structure and the tool. And then you have the morning challenge, which is the other one. And when you combine them together, it makes it easy to go from where you are now to 5 days later, getting a very different result than you're getting. Where before, even though I was talking about mindset and all these different things, I didn't really have that. I didn't have that outcome based result that I could give people. I mean, I did, but I didn't have the words for it. I didn't have the tool for it. And now corporations like to hire me because, they'll run across America. It all sounded cool, but they weren't hiring me for an outcome base. They were hiring me to entertain and inspire their
motivate. Yep.
their people and motivate their people. But then I found after doing the keynote speaking for the corporations for a while, I realized that wasn't really where I wanted to go either. The travel, fantastic. You make 20 grand in an hour, but you have to travel the day before, all the stress to make sure you're getting there on time. If there's flight cancellations and then being there. And it was great in a lot of ways, but it wasn't great in all the ways. Okay. And I'll still do that when it's aligned and it makes sense. But before, that was my main goal, was to become a speaker and just be on the road, going event to event to event to event. And I was moving in that direction until the pandemic happened. But I did it enough that I realized this isn't really the life I want. I don't want to live out of hotels and go back to Vegas and Orlando 50 times a year. After the third or fourth time, it's like, I'm in the same freaking hotel again.
I understand.
So that's part of the entrepreneurial journey too, is you do these things and you realize what you do like and what you don't like, and you make the adjustments and you can build from there. So nothing's a loss, nothing's a mistake, nothing is a failure. They're learning points, they're data points in your journey to get what you want. And as an entrepreneur, if you're not constantly adjusting and moving and refocusing, like a plane is never on target. Plane always has to adjust because of winds and different things. Your entrepreneurial career is the same way. You always have to be adjusting as you get more data points. The airplane computers get the data points of the wind and the headwinds, the against with the side, all that stuff. And the computer's always adjusting, or the pilot needs to adjust manually. We have to do that as entrepreneurs. We have to make the adjustments to be able to get to the journey we want. And if we realize that, Vegas isn't where we want to go anymore, then sure, make a turn, go to a different place and have a different destination.
I help a lot of people write books telling the story of their business. And one of the things we focus heavily on is who is their ideal client. And that seems to be a complicated subject for a lot of people. Who's your ideal client? And I'm not going to quiz you beyond, I'm just curious. Do you have a sense of who that is and what they're looking for?
Generally speaking, it's you and me. Somebody in their 40s or 50s, and they're entrepreneurs.
I'm not sure which you think I am. I'm hoping it's the one, not the other, but we'll deal with that.
I'm guessing you're in your 40s. You got a little bit of gray, so just.
If only.
Well, we'll leave it at that then.
Yeah.
But a guy who's in his 40s or 50s, generally speaking, and is an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial. So it could be real estate or some other consulting type thing, or wants to get out of the corporate world and start a side business and then become a full-time business to replace their income. Somebody who's already kind of self-motivated, but maybe a little bit confused and not sure how to get there. Okay. So that's the perfect client for me. And if they want to go into the online world, selling products and things like that, I can also help with that because I have so much knowledge in that now. I don't specifically teach that yet, although that's probably my next product. But because I've sold millions of dollars and I was number one on Kickstarter, number one in ClickBank, and all these other things that I've had over the years, I've got the experience to help somebody go from zero to making money online and having a stay-at-home business, travel the world, whatever you want to do, like I do.
Okay. And where would you think your ideal client is in terms of their understanding and appreciation of mindset as part of that journey?
They've been dabbling in it at least a little bit, or they're open to it. I find there aren't too many people that are as into it as much as I am, because I've spent the last, I don't know how many years, decades into this world.
Well, you got to do something while you run all those miles. You might as well worry. It's easy to carry your mind with you, easier than taking a book or a Kindle.
And as a side note to that, interesting thing is I never listened to anything when I was running, not in my training miles, not in my run across America or since. And I'm still running today. And I don't listen to audios, music, podcasts, books, or anything like that while I'm running because I want to be in touch with the environment, with what's going on around me. And I love to look at things, hear the birds and all of that. I love being outside in nature. In fact, it's a little bit cold, but normally I'd be doing this podcast from outside in nature somewhere, out on my deck or whatever, but it's a little chilly today.
Where are you located? What part of the world?
At the moment, Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay. Yeah, it's a little colder there today than it's been, right?
It's a little bit chilly, but it's not terribly cold, but just a little cold to be sitting outside unless I have my jacket on.
What's the ideal weather for you when you're running?
For running, this is actually perfect. It was like 52, 53 this morning. And that's ideal running weather for me. It's a little chilly in the beginning, but then it's cold enough to keep my body cold, allows my lungs to breathe better. But it's not so cold that I'm either fighting it, and it's not so hot that I start to sweat too much. So it's an ideal temperature, 55-ish.
Okay. It's fine. My ideal running weather is when it's raining, a light rain.
If it's warm out, if it's raining and it's warm out, I love that.
Yeah. To me, that's not that I do it as much as I should, but that's just one of the most calming things to me is just, and the best part is people drive by you while you're running and they're looking at you like, wow, that guy's really dedicated. You can just see it in their eyes or I perceive it. And I like that affirmation of I'm doing something they wouldn't or couldn't, even though they can.
Yeah. I like to sometimes run in the snow when it goes snowing outside.
I've never run in the snow. I'm always afraid to fall. But if you're in Connecticut, you'll have the opportunity in about a month and a half?
Well, January usually, but it can be earlier. January, February usually, sometimes March. But sometimes we'll go out and run in the snow with just shorts and no shirt.
Okay.
And the reason I do that is the same idea. It's one is because people think you're nuts, and I think that's fun. And people in the car, they're like, you're running in the snow and they're like, they're looking at you and they're like, what is this lunatic doing? But I also do it because of the mindset. And it's why I don't listen to music or audio of any sort because of the mindset. I like to be in touch with what's going on externally as well as internally, physically, but internally with my mind. And it's a tool I use to build my mental strength. It's a tool I use to build focus, to purge toxic thoughts. And if it wasn't for running, I'm not sure I would be remotely at the same level that I'm at now. The running is a major tool for me to purge a lot of the toxic stuff, not only physically, but mostly mentally. Keeps me in shape, keeps me feeling healthy. This morning I ran, it was a speed run. It was only 1.5 miles, but one of the miles I ran a 7:40 pace, which for me at my age is pretty good, especially coming off of an anemia problem, which I didn't realize. And as a PSA, a public service announcement, if you're a runner, you got to check your iron levels. Yep. Because as runners, we go anemic easier than the rest of the population. If you're a runner who donates blood, you definitely have to be on top of it because I was donating too often and I got into a severe anemia problem that nearly ended up in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And now that my body's coming back out of that, I feel like superhuman again, and it's fantastic. So yesterday was the long, easier run. Today was the speed work run. And to hit 7:45 when a month ago, I couldn't even run a 12-minute pace for 1 mile. I had to walk. And I was like, what is going on with me? Because all of a sudden I was getting worse and worse and worse so rapidly. So I went to the doctor and they're like, yeah, you're severely anemic.
Wow. I'm going to pivot back to something you said. You talked about toxic thoughts. I'm sure when you were telling people you were planning to run across the country, you got some people offering you some toxic thoughts, plus out and out, never going to happen. I would think in your entrepreneurial journey, you've had something similar happen at least once or twice, an hour or a day. How do you deal with it, and how would you suggest someone else deal with it?
When I ran across America, everybody said, you're crazy, you're stupid, or you'll kill yourself. Unanimously, of course, because I wasn't a runner and I'm going to train for a year and run across America. It makes sense. Same thing with business. When a lot of the business ideas that an entrepreneur has, most people can't give you positive positive feedback for that because they don't think that way, especially a non-entrepreneurial person. A corporate person thinks very different than we think. And so you can't expect a person that's not in your world to see what you see. And as entrepreneurs, we come up with these ideas that are out of the box. And so we have to follow our intuition and go with them and go forward. And some of the ways that I do with it is I don't talk to certain people about business ideas because I know they're just going to crap all over them and tell me that they're not going to work. Even some of my entrepreneurial friends, they mean well, but they're saying like, that's not a great idea because of this, this, and this. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. I don't remember the name of the guy, but he was the producer for a lot of musicians, hip hop, rap, and all these other things. And this is a white guy looks like ZZ Top more than a guy who's dealing with rappers and this, the street music like that. But he said that the lot of the ideas that he had were so far outside of the box that everyone unanimously told him that that's just not going to work. But he did it anyway, and he changed the music industry by following his intuition and not telling people his ideas and just doing it, just going forward. So to avoid the toxic thoughts from other people, the naysayers, the cynics, the dream stealers, and people that are just negative people overall, is just don't talk to them. To just talk about the weather, talk about football or baseball or whatever. Don't talk about your business ideas. And I'm also learning now that there's a big difference between like you have an idea and you publish it to social media or you tell your friends or something. What happens when you write it on social media or you tell your friends, I got this idea, I'm going to do this thing. It lets off enough endorphins and adrenaline that your body is tricked to some level anyway. Your body is tricked as if you've done it already. And so now you've taken some of that pressure, some of that motivation to move forward. You've taken that steam out of the engine. And so now you're less likely to achieve it if you've told other people. So now I don't do that. And I just put my head down and I work. I tell my diary. And I'm even wondering at that point if I should be altering that idea, which I may be testing coming up in the future. Because if you release the endorphins and the adrenaline and you get all these feel-good chemicals going on in your body as if you've accomplished it, you get this thing I call perceived progress. You feel like you've done something, but you haven't really done it except the idea. The idea is one thing. The activities, the accomplishment's another one. And so keep your ideas to yourself and just work on it. Instead of telling people, get to work on it.
All right, I'm going to push back a little bit, if I may. There are the people that believe in manifesting. There are the people that believe in visualizing before you do something. What you're suggesting is one or both of those may not be the best approach. Is that what you're saying, or am I misunderstanding?
No, what I'm referring to is a little bit different than what you're asking. The manifestation is great. And like last night when I couldn't sleep, I was going through this thought and I started, after I got rid of some of the toxic thoughts and go through that process, I was going through the process. Okay, I did that. Now what I want. And I started focusing on the future, the things I want. What kind of car do I want to be driving? Where do I want to live? What kind of travel? Things like that. Because if you can see it in your mind vividly, if you can see it and feel the emotions that you'd feel. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting out and you don't have the kind of money that you want, and so you set a financial goal, that's great. But if you can actually imagine getting yourself into the Mercedes SL 550 convertible, you put your hand on the steering wheel, you'll feel that soft, subtle leather. You turn the car on, you push the button, and it roars to life. And you start driving down the Connecticut. I'm in Connecticut, so you're driving down the Connecticut roadways, the wind blowing through your hair, the leaves falling. It's a beautiful autumn day. You stop at a vineyard, you have a glass of wine, and you feel it. Don't just see it, but feel it. That's conditioning your mind, rewiring your mind through thought rather than physical, so that the physical can come true. What I'm talking about is posting it to social media, telling people about your idea as if you've accomplished it, and then it takes the steam out of the engine.
Gotcha.
Where one puts the fuel into the engine, the other one takes it out.
Okay. Now you've got me thinking about my beach house that I'm going to have and the water and the mist and the beautiful smell of the ocean and suntan lotion. Okay. Got it.
And that's part of your unstoppable morning is to see that every morning for 5 minutes. to see what you want
Okay.
to see it and feel it. That's part of it.
Okay.
Because
Nice.
you literally need to condition your mind to believe it's because the first thing you're going to do, you're going to, oh, I'm going to be at this beach house. I'm going to smell the water. I'm going to feel the breeze. I'm going to, be on my balcony on the, what do they call that? The
Mhm.
Benai. I forget the name of the balcony. And then, all these things you're going to see. The first thing your mind's going to say is BS. You're full of it. It can't happen. And so you do it over and over and over till eventually your mind's going to say, well, this might be possible. Then eventually you're going to say, you know what? I can do this. And then eventually it's going to become a reality. So you have to convince your mind to go from, yeah, you're full of it to it's possible to, yeah, I can do it. And then doing the steps you need to do to accomplish that, whatever it takes.
Okay. So why don't you take a couple minutes? I've steered this discussion. Take a couple minutes. Tell us whatever you want to tell us. If there's a cause you support and you want us to help you, whatever we can do to help you, whatever, go. I'm going to be quiet. And then after that, we're going to do the Bob Graham experience. All right.
Okay. Well, first thing is to go to unstoppablemorning.com like you just did and get your morning challenge, your 5-day morning challenge, which will also come included with your digital download of the Unstoppable Morning Journal so that you have both tools. You have the tools and you have the challenge to change your life. And I guarantee you on the first day alone, you'll start seeing challenges. And by the end of the 5 days. And the other thing is that if you're not happy in life, if you feel like there's more, if you want more, if there's something that you crave, even if it's a subtle little whisper, is to listen to that and start exploring it. Go in that direction. And if I was to look back in my life and I look at a lot of the things that I did to get to where I am, there were so many things that I just experimented with for a little while that totally didn't work out. And they were absolutely irrelevant in the sense of what I'm doing today, except for that they were steps on the journey to figure out where I wanted to go. And so I tried things that were, now I look back as like, that is just so silly. Yeah, I was doing craft fairs for a while. It was a little side weekend thing that I would do. I would make things and I would sell them at craft fairs because I thought, maybe I could, that was the like a beta testing for products if I could bring them to a bigger audience. But looking back now,
taught you about customers and how to align a product to a customer, gave you that muscle that you had to build. I mean, I think the more I do what I do with people, whether it's writing books or doing this podcast, they usually don't see the connections of their life to where they are now as well as I do. And it fascinates me. It's like, well, of course you did that then because you had to know that. I mean, think of all the things you know now because you've done so many different things that if you hadn't done that, if you hadn't done those craft fairs, you may not be able to sell a product as well. You may not be able to understand feedback as well. There's a lot to it that we don't think about. And then the other thing I was going to say is this whole idea of voices. I think we have a lot of voices that come in our head and we tend to listen to the voices we shouldn't and not hear the voices we should. I know I'm trying very hard to trust my gut more, to be more intuitive because I'm lucky enough to be dating someone who is very intuitive, and I'm amazed at how often she just gets it. Like, and I'm like wandering around in the wilderness trying to figure something out. She's like, well, it's this. I'm like, how do you know? It's like, I just know. So what do you say to all that? Does that align with what you are trying to accomplish and what you do to achieve your success?
Oh, absolutely. And I've tried to get more into being like your girlfriend is and to get more in touch with that. In fact, lately, 2 months ago, I gave up no news whatsoever because it's so toxic. It would make me angry and frustrated. And it just was, and it became just like taking over my world in terms of emotions because I would get so angry at so many things I would see on the line, not from everywhere in the news, not just the political news, but just news in general, because it's so ugly and toxic. And then now I'm working off social media, so I'm not doom scrolling. I don't have any problem with social media, but not to be wasting the time on it. Okay. And so where some of that is productive, but most of it is not. And I'm just replacing that time to study Spanish, to meditate, to do these other things that I should be doing instead of wasting it on these other things. But it's totally in line. But going back to the craft fairs that I did, I learned some things from that, but I had met this one guy who was a jeweler. semi-precious jewels seller. And he would go down to
That's a
Brazil.
high-end craft fair, dude.
Well, the stuff he was selling, I don't think was so high end.
Okay. I'm just picturing 18 diamond baubles or something,
No, this was, I can't call it cosmetic, but the more affordable stuff. And so
Okay.
this guy would go down to Brazil. He kind of looked like a ZZ Top guy too, not as long of a beard, but
Seem to attract them.
I guess
And
so.
the younger people are going, who is this ZZ Top person?
Yeah, right. And so this guy, we connected, and I was in my 20s still, 28, 29. And I'm guessing he was probably probably early 50s, I'm guessing.
Okay.
And so the gray beards were starting, and so he's starting to get there in age. But this guy was a character, a little bit nuts. I mean, he invited me to go to Brazil with him to go pick out the semi-precious stones with him. And I was really tempted because I hadn't really traveled before. I'm not even sure I had a passport at that moment. And I was really tempted, but the guy scared me because the stories he told were just so outrageous. Like, you make movies out of this stuff. But he inspired me with the stories of Brazil and being in the jungle and meeting these people and these different things. He inspired the travel bug in me. And so meeting that guy led to other things down the road. And so that guy, in his old weird way and the crazy stories, changed the trajectory of my life just over a couple of beers, having a drink, and after the craft fairs. And it got me thinking, well, maybe I don't want to go to Brazil to the jungles where the cartels are and things like that. Yeah. But what if I did do something, other things? And eventually I ended up living in Colombia for 6 years, which is right next door to Brazil.
Yeah.
And so not too far away from the journey that he led, I eventually ended up leading.
Okay. Wow. See, it all works out somehow.
So the overall idea of that is that, follow your dreams, go pursue them if you're entrepreneurial, and go do the thing that lights you up, that makes you feel good, that gives you the life that you want to live, regardless of what your other people do. My mom still asks me now, I'm 53 years old. My mom still asks me, well, what do you do for a living?
That's when you know you're a true entrepreneur. If your mother's still asking you what you do for a living, you're an entrepreneur through and through. Well, that should be the test.
She only understands carpentry or plumbing or things like that because that's what they grew up in. And so this whole other world, she's like, I don't get it. Like, I go speak at a stage. They don't understand how I get paid to go speak on a stage. My parents just don't get it.
Well, with that, I want to shift gears and we're going to do the Bob Graham experience. Okay. You ready for this?
Sounds good.
I'm going to give you 5
I got my puppy here to guard me just in case.
Okay. I'm going to give you 5 questions. 1 sentence answers, a little longer, not a big deal. Same questions I ask everyone. So are you ready for this experience? Because it's going to change your life. This is going to rival running across the United States. At the end, you're going to feel just as a sense of accomplishment and fatigue.
I'm excited. This sounds
all right. Here we
right
go.
up my alley.
What's the last thing that you read?
That I read? The Bhagavad Gita. I read it actually last night when I couldn't sleep.
Okay. That's a new one for me.
That's a heavy reading.
Honesty. All right.
Heavy
Second
reading.
question. What's your most important inspiration?
My kids.
Okay. How many do you have?
2. One just went to college, Penn State, and the other one is in high school playing football.
Oh, okay. Penn State. Very nice.
Yeah. And those 2 inspire me in so many different ways, just so many ways.
Okay. Awesome. Next question. Your biggest daily challenge?
Focus.
Okay.
Staying focused.
Like someone with ADD.
Keeping my head down on
earlier, I'm with you. I understand more than you realize. Next question. What is your guiding principle?
So that at the end of my life, I don't end up looking back and feel like I could have done more. I don't want to be 90 years old looking back and saying, what if I would have just?
Okay. I was trained as a journalist, and you are one of those obituary people. When you
Yes.
die, they will write about you. There are two types of people. There are the people that are going to die, and it's just like, yep, okay, they died. And then there are the people where it's like, back in the 90s or 2010, he did this, this, and this. So I think you're safe in that regard. All right.
Not yet, but I want to make sure.
Okay. The last question on the Bob Graham experience. What's the skill you didn't know you had that you rely on now?
I think writing. When I was a child, I wrote an essay and I got an F on it, and she said some people aren't meant to be great writers. But what I was good at the time was storytelling, but I didn't have the technical experience. So when I became a writer, I had to learn.
Okay.
And I realized that other people liked my writing, and now that's the basis of everything, of all the money I've made and everything I've done is for now writing.
Communicating, yeah, with words, absolutely, yeah. And I'm going to ask you a bonus question. What's a book or a podcast you would recommend everyone read or listen to?
Oh gosh, there's dozens of them for both categories. I just listened to Joe Dispenza. What is it called? It is called there's two. There's the placebo effect, which is actually a better one to start with. And the follow-up to that is whatever the follow. Gosh, I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head.
I can't remember it either. That's all right. They'll find it.
Joe Dispenza, the placebo effect. You are the placebo. That's a great book to start with because it talks about the mindset and what we talked about before about how to see it in your mind visually and to feel it is what you create in the future. Okay.
Well, this has been amazing. I really appreciate your time, your insights. You gave me chills about 10 times during our discussion.
And just so everybody listening knows, we've never met before.
We have not, no.
So a little bit of serendipity. We became connected on LinkedIn, and then one of us sent a message. I think you sent a message to me, and then I saw that you had a podcast. I was like, "Hey, you're looking for guests?" Yep. And we have now met and we've connected very, very well. I think this was a great interview.
Absolutely. I hope we can stay in touch. This has been great. And folks, this is what we do on the Bob Graham Experience. Come back again or check our archives. We've got a whole bunch more of them just all over the place. People talking about their journey. It's amazing stuff. I get chills just thinking about it. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for the great questions.
Of course. Happy to do it.
That was the Bob Graham Experience. Want to be a guest and experience it for yourself? Visit thebobgrahamexperience.com to get on the list. And of course, please rate us and listen to other episodes wherever you had the Bob Graham Experience. Until next time.